All set.
Okay, good afternoon and greetings. My name is Vice President Willie Lightfoot. Today is our City Council work session on code changes for animal services. I'm joined with Commissioner Dr. Daniel Lyman Torres, as well as the Animal Center's Director, Christopher Fitzgerald. I'm sorry if I got that title wrong. Director, I get stuff wrong sometimes here, but I'm sure you'll correct me when you come up. We're also joined with Councilmember Lachey Harris and Councilmember Malik Evans, and Councilmember Miguel Melendez has joined us as well. So we're looking to have a great conversation about code change for animal services. And at this time, I will turn it over to Dr. Daniel Lyman Torres.
Thank you very much, Vice President Lightfoot and members of council. As the Vice President indicated, Chris Fitzgerald, the Director of Animal Services, is here and will be presenting on the proposed code changes that we will be putting before you in this upcoming legislative cycle. And I will bring up some slides for us to go through. All right. Now, before I kick it over to Chris to talk very specifically about the code changes, I did want to take a moment and address council's request to have a brief update on the transition for animal services from RPD to DRIs. Some of the things that we had hoped we would be able to achieve as a part of the transition includes increasing animal services visibility in the community and connectivity to citizens and residents. And we've been able to do that through a more formalized relationship with the R centers, publishing information about animal services in our R guide that does get mailed to every city resident household. We also have, our social media and our marketing and communications that happens in DRIs is, we have a wide audience, a lot of registrants and people who we communicate with on a regular basis that represents a broader audience than perhaps animal services had been able to reach before. So part of the transition has been our ability to help increase their visibility and connectivity to residents. We've experienced that so far. We've also done quite a bit of listening and collecting community input as a part of this transition. And some of that input has allowed us to think about, doing a full review of the division. And I'll talk about a little bit about the needs and opportunities. And one of the key next steps is launching a community engagement and rebranding plan as a result of some of the listening and community input that we have done, but we also know that council has received as well. So in our review of the division and its transition, there have been some needs and opportunities identified. You will see as council some continued recommendations coming through our capital improvement plan to talk about the facility and to address some concerns about the facility and what are some opportunities for, looking at a new facility or expanded facility. And we're examining that with our DES team now as we prepare for the capital budget process. We're also taking a close look at the needs around key personnel recruitment, veterinarian techs, vets themselves. There are many key personnel positions that we have that we do from time to time struggle with recruiting and retaining because, of the shortage in our community of people who have these particular certifications and credentials. So there'll be some opportunities to, as you see on the right, actively develop a local, workforce pool in this regard. We've also looked at policies, which is what Chris is going to talk to you about today. And that leads us to some of those proposed code changes that we are putting before you. We've looked at technology and equipment needs and understanding, as I said before, the community perceptions and expectations of services from Rochester Animal Services. So we've identified that, that community engagement is something we really need to focus on as an opportunity. And we will be putting forward some plans to do that formally, to formally collect information from the community and to, move forward an assessment of how we can match up and align the needs of the community with the services that we can provide. We also have the opportunity to continue to leverage our relationship with the Verona Street Animal Society. They've been great friends and partners, and there's an opportunity to continue to leverage that relationship, which has been very helpful. And including what Chris has talked about quite a bit, our involvement with the Haas movement of human animal support services, and really that connectivity strategically of how important it is to connect humans and animals together and to look at our services as really serving both of those groups in a combined effort.
Dr. Torres, can I just check in for a quick moment here? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just would like to ask this question while I'm able to. We know that you just talked about the new facilities, and I've been a starch advocate of I think that facilities definitely needs, especially the Verona Street area, needs to be we need a bigger, better facility. And I'm wondering, and this may, I don't know if this, it's a no question asked is the question that, you know what I mean, you should have asked, right? So are we able with this ARPA funds, and when you talk about the CIP, and I think I heard in the presentation that some of those dollars could be used for CIP type allocations. Is this something that could potentially, especially when we're talking about quality of life, and we know the animals and they do for people and trauma, et cetera, is this something that could be considered to use some of those funds to allocate towards like a new building?
That has not been our assessment to date. Our assessment to date is that this particular project, while it doesn't seem like it is a full fit to qualify for ARPA dollars, it does have the opportunity to then, be backfill into the capital improvement plan, where there are some projects in there that do qualify for, ARPA funds. So I think either way, the ARPA is going to help be able to get there. I just don't think it's a direct connection. And it is our intention to submit plans and to put that forward in this capital improvement cycle. So you will see that from us get submitted in terms of what we are suggesting regarding the facility.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question about facilities since we're talking about it?
Yes, please.
Do you suspect, Commissioner Lemon-Torres or Chris or both of you, that because I think we all agree that we need a new facility, it's just a matter of timing and funding. Do you suspect it'll be a rebuild in the same location, an expansion of the same location, or are we talking about something that's completely new and somewhere else?
Well, we have to take a look at that. The DES team is doing that right now. I mean, we have to examine, once we have the full scope. There was a plan done that was sponsored by the Friends a few years back that gives us a good indication of what we may be able to do. But of course, we have to update that with, today's, reality, environment, pricing, et cetera. And DES is doing that now. So it may be the case where it could work out at that location, or we may be making recommendations for a separate location. That hasn't been determined, but what I do know we will be recommending is a new facility.
Thanks.
Yep. All right. Well, with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who does want to talk through the proposed code changes with you, members of council, before we put that before you this upcoming month. Chris?
Thank you, Commissioner and members of council and staff. We're all about serving people and animals. That's what we do on a daily basis. And it comes from a place that's rooted in social justice and equity. So that's the lens that I used when I initially approached the ordinance review, was to look at how we are perhaps disproportionately impacting impoverished communities and communities that have been systemically oppressed. So our communities of color and other marginalized communities. But in going from beginning to end, it also made sense to look at just some general updates. So there's a combination of both here that are being proposed. Some are fairly trivial, or might seem trivial and just like word changes, and others are more substantive. So we'll start with the kind of general updates. So for instance, the facility that we were just talking about is referred to as an animal shelter. We're the Animal Services Division. We've been the Animal Services Division for 21 years. And whenever I reference the facility, I refer to it as the Animal Services Center, because it's more than just the shelter that it was maybe 20 years ago. And it's certainly more than the dog pound that it was 50 years ago. So this is just about that evolution. And then the next section talks about interference with an animal control officer. Well, I've proposed the change in their job title to Animal Services Officer to be more in line with who we are as an organization. There's so little of the control that was initially the origins of dog control in our work in what we do, because they're not out scooping up dogs with nets and throwing them in the back of trucks and then taking them to the pound. It's much more complicated than that, and they're as likely to return that dog not with a net to on a leash that they're walking back to the owner than they are to bring it to the center. These next two sections, 3035 and 3041, both reference fees and who has the authority to approve fees. So with the change in department, it doesn't make sense for it to be the chief of police. So I'm recommending that just be changed to the director of animal services. The next two are both about sterilization. So one is in chapter 30, which is animal regulations, and it's like basically everything that's not a dog. And chapter 31 is all about dog licensing and dog regulations. So both chapters have a section that talks about sterilization. This was originally added to the code in 2007, and then it was amended in 2017. In 2017, we probably should have done a better job of cleaning up the preamble. So it's superfluous. It's got a lot of unnecessary language words in it that don't really speak to the topic anymore. And we will continue to sterilize all cats and dogs before they're released from the shelter to adoptive homes, but the rest of it is kind of it's irrelevant to that. In terms of definitions, I proposed adding a couple of terms that would be synonymous, like adding pet guardian to be synonymous with owner, and adding companion animal to be synonymous with pet. But adding two new definitions, one for community cat to distinguish them from an owned pet or companion animal, and a community cat caretaker that would be distinct from an owner of the animal, because by definition, community cats are not owned. So moving into the changes that are more about improvements and our evolution and our impact in the community. Again, starting with chapter 30, which is non-dogs. There's the first section is about animals not running at large, and this was, I believe, first established in 1941. So my assumption is that it was focused on other animals, primarily livestock, and not focused on companion animals. Cats weren't even kept indoors regularly until, more commonly, until the 50s and 60s, because cat litter didn't exist until 1947. So So I don't think cats were part of the intent here. And it does seem like it could be misapplied to owned cats, which are, routinely kept as indoor outdoor cats or 100% outdoor cats. So I think we have to clarify that. It is a societal norm for people to allow their cats to roam outside. And so this doesn't seem like it reflects that. But we could also exclude community cats from this mix by being more specific about whether we're talking about companion animals, farm animals, or fowl, because community cats are none of those. In the next, so then both in 30 and 31 have just a section on the purpose and intent, and essentially I just think that we need to update it so it's more current and reflects our evolving role in animal services, that we do more than just control loose dogs or animals that wreak havoc on our community. There's much more supportive services involved, and so including that kind of language. For this section on enforcement, I'm suggesting that we incorporate some of those other supportive services and other resolution tactics in there, that enforcement not be our only highlighted service here, but that we have a toolbox with us, and we're more likely to go to the resource or the support that keeps the pet with the family and doesn't punish someone that might be struggling with some issues with access to resources. Again, with on that same theme, 3037 is about issuing notices of violation. So those are the tickets that we issue, and just being able to support the discretionary enforcement. So lots of municipalities have shifted away from using shall in favor of may. They empower their team to use other options and to try and better address root causes of the concerns, as opposed to again criminalizing what's oftentimes lack of resources. And the seizure and redemption, there's a reference in here, and I'm proposing that we could include some language in here that would support the efforts of the groups and individuals who are helping with trap, neuter, vaccinate, return, and the community cat groups, the feral cat groups, the community members who want to help by trapping cats, getting them vaccinated, sterilized, and then return back to their homes. So it would be another category of animals that we're authorized to accept and provide those services for. And it's not specifically spelled out that way in the code. So for the leash law, adding some allowance for alternative containment. That issue came up a couple of times while I was doing the review, and I thought it might be more, more inclusive, and it gives people more options. They might not be able to afford to install a fence, but maybe they can deal with the service for the electronic device. But I think additionally it is adding some consideration that could be given, provided to pet owners when somehow the animals got loose and it's due to circumstances that were out of their control. So allowing for some provisions in the code that allows us to consider those things and not have to blanketly issue citations for everyone. For a couple of sections, I'm recommending that we remove the seizure of animals as the remedy, like for howling and barking and for nuisances. I think it's on the next slide. Because really, like I said, we're about serving people and animals. We want to support people and animals staying together. So if we've got a dog at its home, we want to keep it there, but we want to exhaust all these other options that we have to resolve the issue and get to the root cause. And whether that's through conflict resolution, dispute resolution, mediation, and then the escalation of written warnings, and then first offense, second offense, third offense. Those still would be options there for situations where people are scoffing the law or are unwilling to work with us or their neighbors. But if we can resolve the issue in a less punitive way, that's going to be our preference. And having ordinances that say that we should seize the animal to stop the nuisance, it's really a Band-Aid approach. One, we wouldn't get a warrant from probably any judge for that, but it doesn't really change the behavior. It essentially punishes the owner, punishes the dog, and temporarily resolves the issue, which will pop up as soon as the next person gets a dog or that person gets the next dog. For dangerous dogs, I'm recommending that we actually rely on the state's definition and statute. Our definition has a lot of subjectivity in it that seems problematic, and I wish I had caught it before now. But I think it's relying on the state's definition would better serve us, and it would, I think, be more consistent and less subjective about what dogs are deemed or potentially viewed as dangerous. The next section is specific to dogs that have bitten and they have to be under confinement. It's a public health requirement that they be observed and confined for 10 days, but it's also common practice for the health department to authorize the dog to stay at home for that confinement period. So we're basically wanting our code to reflect that and kind of catch up with the practice that has been commonplace in our area. This is the other section that this is the unlicensed untagged dogs. There's 2 references to licenses in this chapter. This one is, about the authority to seize animals that are unlicensed or untagged. I'm in favor of us having language that supports us trying to reunite the pets with their owners, the dogs with their owners, whether it's through our actions or the police officer's actions. But the reference on the slide is to the 3-year license. So, I brought it up here because it's an opportunity for city clerk's office and city council to consider. It's something that municipalities have the option to have a 3-year license, and we haven't done that since the statute was amended in 2011. But it might be an opportunity to help boost compliance as an incentive if there's a price drop for a multi-year license. And certainly if it was implemented in conjunction with, say, online licensing, I think the 2 things together could have an impact both in increasing compliance and increasing revenue that then goes to support our services.
Chris, will that language, I assume we're going to see the specific language at some point, but will the language around the 3-year license, will it also talk about kind of anything at all about enforcement related to the compliance? Because I mean, our rate of licensure is pretty low, correct?
Yeah, but it's low everywhere in the country. So, it's low, but I mean, there's municipalities that aren't licensing anymore, and they're using microchips instead as their form of registration. So they may have another form of enforcement or compliance around the microchip, but the effort, I think, is focused on keeping the pet with the owner or reuniting the pet with the owner, and and less on, like a punitive role in enforcement, or, a tool for punitive measures.
Got it. Thank you.
Vice President Lightfoot.
Okay, was that the end of your presentation?
I think, no, I think
Vice
we're
President
just,
Lightfoot, I have a question, if I may.
okay.
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
Since the clerk's office issues dog licenses, Chris, how do you propose to get around the rabies requirement with your proposal for 3-year licenses?
Well, so this was part of what we had as an option in 2010 when we had to prepare for the changes. What's been discussed at other municipalities that may have opted for the 3-year license, I don't know, but we would certainly benchmark with them. But so the first rabies vaccination that a pet is given is good for 1 year. And then if it's vaccinated, within the time frame in the next year, 12 months later, it's good for 3 years. And every time thereafter, it's good for 3 years. So, someone that was going to register their dog for a 3-year license, but didn't have a 3-year rabies would have to resolve that with us. They'd have to provide the certificate for those 2 missing years, I suppose. But anybody else that had the 3-year license, so that's anybody who's keeping up with their rabies after the first year, already automatically has that schedule, and then the license would correspond with the same schedule. But I think the details of that we could certainly work out.
Okay, we can talk offline. Thank you.
Sure. Other questions, or should I keep going? This is the last slide.
Why don't you finish the slide and then we'll turn them off and answer questions.
Okay. So chapter 3111 is the section that limits the number of dogs. So the number is limited to 4 dogs in a single household, a duplex, or a dwelling that has 3 units. So each one of those could have up to 4. Once you get to 4 or more units in a dwelling, the limit goes down to 1. My understanding is that when this was established in '92, it was pretty contentious. It does seem to be pretty arbitrary. I'm proposing that we do away with it, because most of the concerns that we hear about dogs are related to the other sections of code that are covered. So things like barking, accumulation of feces, the dogs running at large, those are already covered by all these other sections. So this seems unnecessarily punitive to have another obstacle, but it also means that we're limiting our adoption candidate pool, because all of those apartment complexes or houses that are 4 or more units that have people who love animals in them, if their property manager says they're allowed to have 2 dogs, we're saying they can't. It seems arbitrary. And so this isn't really meant to to authorize extreme animal collecting or hoarding, because that could be addressed again through other statutes or ordinances that we have, or that are state statutes. But to allow people that have 1 dog to get a second. And just by doing that, our adoption pool candidate pool could increase exponentially. In terms of penalties, I'm proposing that there be some language that authorize the waiving of fines, so that we're not imposing a restriction on a person being able to get their animal back from us, their dog back from us, before they pay a fine. Holding the animal as collateral is not a good practice for the animal. And it doesn't mean that person's not going to get another dog. And that what we've just done is basically taken that dog from someone who can't afford the fine, And we're going to adopt it out, hopefully, to someone else that's more than likely lives in the suburb of the city. So we're kind of, we're supporting the translocation of pets from impoverished communities to middle class communities. In terms of nuisances, is the one I mentioned before. I don't think we should have seizure as a remedy for the ongoing nuisances or accumulation of feces. The dog license thing we already discussed, so it comes up in those two sections of code. And then the last thing was really, it's a reference to euthanasia services in the code. And again, it just is limiting and it's outdated. It doesn't reflect the other outcomes that we work to support. The first being pet retention. So when folks contact us, we're trying to support them through offering resources or intervention so that they can keep their pet. And then working with them on possibly putting it into a new home directly from their home, diverting it to another partner organization, or we may adopt it out or transfer it to another organization after it comes in here. But end of life services is something that we offer and will continue to offer for pets that are at the end of their life because of age or infirmary. But I think better explain the scope of that service in this section of code would be helpful. And that's it.
Thank you, Chris. I just wanted to point out to council that you, of course, will get the full draft of what is being proposed, as well as a cover memo to kind of point out exactly what Chris has talked about in terms of what sections are being proposed to be updated. So you will get that in full text, but we wanted to take this work session to certainly explain these this number of code changes, since we've been able to do this review and also be able to answer questions that you might have about these, as Chris has done a very thorough job of going through the code at length and identifying opportunities for improving services to residents and reducing penalties that keep people and pets apart, and that increases the number of animals that are back in the shelter system. So, thank you, Chris, for doing a really thorough job of that. And at this time, Chris can field some questions if you have any, members of council.
I have a question. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not sure. I'm using my phone and I don't see anything except a big yellow dot. So the whole process for adopting these changes, how are these proposals shared? I know there are some people who are very passionate about animals and their care and, shall we say, captivity. How will the community know what's going on with this? How would that be shared?
Is that for me?
Yeah, Chris, you can talk about your town halls and your plans.
So we, as the commissioner mentioned, we're trying to work on a variety of things to inform and engage the community. So some of our community members have been included in our town hall meetings we've done with our volunteers. We're in the middle of a brand development project right now with Causeway Community Partners, and that involved a survey that went out to get feedback. So we do have that in the works for surveys. But in terms of the specific process, to date, it's all been internal. We started this in the police department. I submitted proposed changes to the chief, and then with the transition, we kind of backed up. I looked at them again and resubmitted them to the commissioner. So I think we have to work out how we want include an informed community besides who's ever streaming tonight.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'll ask a question. Chris, I recall probably a couple of years ago you brought some code changes to us as well related to, I just remember we were talking about like people having like alligators as pets, some like real, right? Was what alligators, crocodiles, something along those lines, right, Chris?
Right. Yeah, there were some changes a couple years ago. It was, well, because the city had a list of the animals you weren't allowed to have, the wild animals you weren't allowed to have, and I was proposing that we either clean up the list or revert to something else. And I think, ultimately we kind of reverted to more of the state's definitions. But
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, first of all, I appreciate the fact that you are regularly kind of reviewing the code and making sure that we're updating things and making sure that what you're doing reflects what the reality is in 2021. I'm just wondering why now for this new, is the context here that, you moved over to Department of Rec and Human Services and just had more of an opportunity to change some of these things? Or I know some of the things are reflective of that change. And just, do you feel that all this stuff needs to happen right now, or what kind of prompted it?
Well, so a couple of things. I'd say it definitely is reflective, or what I think it is reflective of is the alignment of our organization with our new department. But many of these things were in the works before the transition. So my effort to look at it through a lens of equity and inclusion stems more from our involvement with Pets for Life. So we've been involved since 2016. We're a mentorship partner since official mentorship partner since 2018. And so that that I think that kind of fueled it or drove the process, motivated me to dig into it, and then and that kind of just kind of led into the human animal support services work, which again is also rooted in diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So all of those things really contributed to why I took a look at it. And it was probably like a year ago or more that I started the process. So I don't think we even knew which department, if any, we were going to. But I think it's noteworthy that you're picking up on. There is an alignment there, and the kind of synergies that you asked about at the budget hearing. We're still working on expanding some of those partnerships, and so it does make sense. But it's something that's been a long time in the process, and is fueled by the work of animal services is much more social service work than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Well, it appears that there are none. This has been a very informative presentation. I'm sure a lot of work was involved in going through that. Anytime you're looking at changes that extensive, that requires a lot of work and research as well. So I thank you, Commissioner and Chris. Thank you very much for your work on this. If we are done, I'd like to adjourn our meeting.
Thank you, President Scott. Thank you, members of council.
Thank you, everyone.